Okay, good morning, Kendra, from snowy Montreal, 15th B'Shvat, otherwise known as Tu B'Shvat. We're on page 80 in the Chayinu. In today's lesson, we're discussing that when somebody does an Aveda, they literally separate from Hashem. Therefore, a person should never want to do an Aveda, and then even says that you're lower
Westorange.com.
than.
Zoom. That's it.
Just mute your side there.
But well, this is mute. Hold on. This is mute.
Okay. Number also our sages explain that if a man's wife turns aside and commits adultery, no man commits any transgression unless the spirit of folly has entered into him. And no one can head in present of Veda unless something stupid, a weak moment. And the sages relate the word of sishta, turning aside, to shtus, folly. אפילו איש המנאפס שדעתו קלה, היסו משלת ברוח טבע לולי רוח שטוס שבו. Or even an idolatrous woman, with her frivolous nature, could have controlled her passionate drive were it not for the spirit of folly. This woman who did the sin, a man who did a terrible sin. We wouldn't do it unless stupidity enters our head. Master, what does the spirit of folly do? As we explained in the previous chapter, every yid has in his heart a love for Hashem. So what does the spirit of folly do? It covers over that love that we already have for Hashem in our hearts. And all the neshama wants to do is cleave to Hashem. But when you do something stupid spiritually, that's not good for you spiritually, and ultimately even physically, it's not good for you. Because if you have a spiritual death, everything is interrelated and connected. And a person suffers the separation from Hashem. And all a person truly, and all the essence of the person truly wants to do is l'davka b'emunas Hashem. A person does not want to separate from Hashem any way, anytime, anyhow. Even if this idol worship that a person fell to such a low level. Today we don't have such a type for idol worship. We have a different form of idol worship. It's ego. It's there's so many different things that we get attracted to that become idols in our own mind that we end up following. So sorry. Okay. Even if this idol worship consists merely of an empty act, let's say I didn't really care too much about this idol worship, I just fell into the pressure with any belief in the idol worship. Still wrong, but you're saying, nah, maybe it's nothing. We call shekain lichpa sheyetzav v'tavis miyuf shehem yisurin kalim imiso yish Hashem yishmelinu. Now, if her hidden love of Hashem has the power to enable her to face death rather than be separate from Hashem, surely then it has the power to overcome the temptation and lust for idolatry, which is lighter suffering than death. A few last week, 2 weeks ago, we were talking about Mesiras Nefesh, that every single Jew has the possibility to give up his whole life for the sanctification of God's name. And now you're sinning by worshiping something other than Hashem, whether it's ego or even just transgressing a violation of the Torah that separates you from Hashem. It doesn't make any sense. You're willing to give up your life, and now you're cutting yourself off spiritually. It doesn't make any sense. But he says it's only the spirit of folly, it's only this shtus and this stupidity that enters a person's mind. And a person could argue, idolatry, adultery, and this is dafka, the stupidity. This is the stupidity that a person has. A person says, so I had a relationship with someone outside my marriage. Okay, nothing. What happened? Nothing happened. I move on. Idolatry, never. And where does this come from? It comes from this stupidity, this spirit of folly stemming from the klipa. And by the way, that's the job of the klipa. That's the job of the Yitzhara, to get you to wave off the big sins and even the small ones. What it does is the klipa renders her sensitivity to the enormous breach between Hashem and herself and Hashem that is created by every sin. If she were talking aware of this breach, she would never overcome desire, and she would fall. She would certainly, I'm sorry, she would certainly overcome desire and refrain from sin. We would realize that even the small little act that we did, that we nobody sees, but we knew that it was creating a chasm. Is that the right word? A chasm? Steve, is that the right word? Thumbs up. Okay. So that if we knew and understand and felt that, we would never do even the smallest sin. המלבש יש לנפש של הכיס עד בחינוך חוכמה שבו, ולא יעד בכלל, בפני השם המלובש בחוכמה יתפלל. That the spirit of folly envelops the divine soul only up to but not including the faculty of Chachma, which, as we explained in chapter 18, represents the power of faith in Hashem. This faith is unaffected by the klipa and the stupidity that enters our mind. Ultimately, our neshama is connected to God. Nothing can sever that. Nothing can break that. But in truth, even he who commits a minor sin transgresses the will of Hashem. You say, this guy's a tzaddik, he davens every day. When it comes to minor things, somebody comes over, starts speaking Lashon Hara, whatever. No, tell me more, tell me more. Okay, everybody has their weak point, and that's what the Yetzer Hara is going to exploit. A person is completely given over to the oneness of Hashem. Even more than the Sitrach and Klippa, which are called strange gods and alagas. So we're talking about the small sin is even worse than the Sitrach and the Achidim, idol worship and everything else. And more than all the things of this world that are derived from them, anything that comes from the negative side, the other side. The unclean animals, and birds, and vermin, and reptiles all receive their life force from the three unclean klippas. So the person who transgresses even a minor sin is worse than the lowest klippa, the lowest creature that received their vitality from this klippa. Our sages have said when a man sins, he's told, the gnat precedes you, the tiniest of insects. We're not even talking about the Yetzer Hara. We're not even talking about an evil person. We're talking about just a bug. It was created for a purpose, and it's fulfilling its mission. And you were created for a purpose, and you're not fulfilling the mission, so you're lower than that. The simple meaning of the statement is you have no cause for pride. Even the lowly gnat was created before you, but the deeper spiritual meaning is that the gnat, the tiny little bug, takes precedence over the sinner in rank. So the Alter explains, this means that even the gnat, which, as the Talmud continues and states, consumes food but does not ex, ex, excrete, how do you say that? Excrete, indicating a klipa, which is the height of selfishness. It doesn't give anything of itself, it only consumes. Remember the saying, not what do I need, but what am I needed for? So, yeah, okay. We give. Well, we also need, we also receive. Or many people receive, but they also give a little bit. In this case, the gnat doesn't give anything. It doesn't contribute anything to the world. It eats, and that's it. It becomes part of its body. It doesn't go out. Nothing goes out of it. This is the very lowest form of klipa. All it does is take. We could at least justify. We could take a person, even if he's selfish and arrogant and everything else. Once in a while, he sees somebody, he sees a poor person, even if he gives begrudgingly, but he gives a little bit. But the gnat doesn't give it all. But here we say we're even lower than the gnat. That takes precedence over the sinner in the order of descent. Because the person has free choice not to do that. The gnat's just doing what it was created to do. So this means that the klipa symbolized by the gnat, the little tiny bug, derives its life force from a higher level of godliness than that from which the sinner is sustained. Oof, that hurts. The kol shkein sha'ar bali chayim v'tmeim afilu chayis roi shekulam einoim mishanim tafkidam v'ktus of kudasa yisparech shamrirucham v'afal gav diu lo chazi. And surely the other unclean creatures, even ferocious beasts, they're higher up, obviously, than the gnat, but they're also higher than the sinner. All of these don't deviate from their divine mission and godly purpose. If they're nasty animals, they're messy, they're smelly, or they attack, that's the way they were created. They're not doing anything wrong. That is their nature. So meaning the life force animating them, which is aware of the divine will, does not permit them to act in violation of it. Which goes to Menachem. So, for example, we mentioned Bilam yesterday. Bilam was there to curse the Jews, but he understood the divine will. So he can do whatever he was put on earth to do. But when it came to a certain point, Hashem said, stop, he can't go any further. He had no power. That could stop. That was the end of that. The pasuk says, which pasuk is this? From Sanhedrin 38b. No, I'm sorry. First the pasuk from Bereshit. That the fear and dread of you shall lie upon every beast of the earth. That's the fear of Hashem. And our sages explained that a wild beast will never define human being unless he appears to it like an animal. As long as we act, that's why the Baal Shem Tov used to roam the forest all by himself after his father died. At 12 years old, he was an orphan from his mother and his father. His mother passed away when he was very young. His father died when he was 12. And the last word that he told him was to fear only Hashem. But he also told him, which I heard last night at a Fabrengen here in Montreal, he also told him to love every Yid with all his heart, with like a fiery flame. And that's why he went around trying to uplift and cherish every single Jew, especially and specifically the simple Jew. Because those years, for many years leading up to the Baal Shem Tov going around, the simple Jew was downtrodden, and not just by our enemies, but by our enemies within, by the leadership of the communities. You're a nothing, sit in the back of the shul, the front of the shuls for the Chashuv people, which was very few and far between. So everybody else was just berated. And unfortunately, the leadership thought in that time that's the way it was. That's the derech. That's the way we're going to bring people closer by being tough on them and sort of putting them down. But it didn't work. Baal Shem Tov challenged that ideology. Okay, so that's as far as a wild beast is concerned. That if you act like an animal, he's going to smell the fear. He's going to be able to attack you. If you if you Rabbi Herson used to say, Rabbi Herson Olderfelm used to say the story that once the Frierdiker was traveling in a wagon and a pack of wolves came out and they terrified the horses and the horses were going berserk and the wagon was going to be toppled over and it was going to be horrible. The horses just were uncontrollable. The wagon driver couldn't control them. So the Frierdiker got out and stood and the wolves recognized. Remember he told the story? The wolves, they saw this. The Frierdiker did not have any averus or any animalistic desires or tendencies. And he stood up to the wolves. The wolves whimpered and walked and ran away. And they continued on their path. A few more details to the story. Anyways, v'tzadikim she'ein tzelem elikim mistalek mi'al pneihem kol chayos rois. Gafian kamayhu k'moshe kosev zer gavi Daniel v'goiv aroyis. In fact, when confronting tzaddikim from whose face the divine image never departs, the evil beasts are humbled before them, as is stated in the Zohar concerning Daniel in the lines then similar to the story that I just shared with you. That not only did the lions not harm him, but on the contrary, they humbled themselves before him. At any rate, what emerges from this is that even the animals do not violate God's will. You're acting like an animal, so then all bets are off. אם כן, אחית עבר רצוני יסברך אפילו מעבר עברי קלה בשעת מעשה, הוא בתכלת תריחו מקדושה עליונה, שייחוד ואחדות יסברך. So it's clear that he who sins and transgresses against Hashem's will, even a minor thing, you think, no big deal. The time that he commits the sin is completely removed from the divine holiness, meaning Hashem's unity and oneness. Allah is not trying to make us feel bad here. He's not trying to chastise us in any way. You sinners, you terrible people, you're being cut off from Hashem. It's just stating facts. Facts. We're trying to show how Ahavas Hashem and Yiras Hashem is right. It's very possible to do. So if you realize that the Eibishter cares about every single thought, deed, and word, and if you do the opposite, you're going to be separated, you should realize that this is the result. If a child plays with a knife, he's not going to be punished by his father by having a cut on his finger. When my kids peel apples by themselves when they're really young, they end up with we didn't do that to them. It's the result of not, and sometimes it happens. So this is what happens if you do a minor offense. We're completely removed from holiness, so we would never sin. We would realize that this is the Yetzer Hara's job, and we have our job. We have to stop it. So if we do something that's even a minor transgression, we're cut off even more so than all the unclean creepers and the vermin and the reptiles, which derive their sustenance from the Sitraka and the Klipa of Avodah Zarah. This all sounds pretty harsh, but it's very simple. Just don't do it. You know the commercial, just do it? In this case, just don't do it. Okay, of course, easier said than done. We have our challenges, and we have the angels of Hashem that are there specifically to throw us off our game. But we have to put our mind to it, and we know even the most difficult thing that, especially for a Baal Tshuva, let's say, for example, starting to keep Shabbos is like an unimaginable thing. And then you do it 1 week, and then the next week you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again. And like 10, 20, 30 years later, I keep Shabbos. Not a question. Kobe Adler was telling me the day that he started putting on tefillin. 23 years or 27 years, whatever it is. So he says, for 23 years, I never thought I'd ever put on tefillin in my life. And one day he starts, and that's it. He didn't stop. It's something you think is impossible, either not to do or to do. All you have to do is just do it, or don't do it, and move on. And 20, 30 years later, you're like, you know what? I thought I could never do it, but I stopped. So all the things demonstrate how one's hidden love of Hashem can enable him to overcome his desire and transgress any sin. Meaning, not to transgress any sin, if I didn't say that right. And when he considers that thereby he becomes separate from Hashem, even more so than these lowly creatures, is going to recoil. Imagine, I don't want to be lower than the bugs and the rats and the vermin. And he realizes that all this is because Hashem is testing him and Hashem has faith in him. As we say in Maida'ani every single day, we say, Hashem has full and complete faith in us that we will overcome these challenges. So the takeaway for today, however, is any transgression is a detour from Hashem's will and oneness. But to rise above it, I will not be foolish to think that a small transgression is acceptable. I remember, I don't want to say who it was, but he used to tell me, when it comes to little things, God will forgive me. God will forgive me. Like, he might forgive you like a father would forgive a child, but it still hurts him. You know, you don't have to do that. I don't know whatever happened to that. But in any event, Chavra, from snowy Montreal, I hope to see you tomorrow. And have a wonderful day. Thanks, Steve, for joining, and I'll post the video. Thanks so much. Have a good day. We're going to daven now. The next meeting starts at 9:40. I'm sorry, 9:30, which is in 4 minutes.